This is not a legitimate prosecution.
Yes.
This is a political persecution.
Yeah.
I've been practicing for 34 and a half years, and I've seen a lot of unjust prosecutions.
Yep.
There isn't anything that's on the scale of a political persecution that I've seen as this case.
Yes.
This was brought from Washington, D.C. by the people on the top of the government solely for political reasons. The case is being handled by persecutors that they brought in from Washington, D.C. because it's a political case. They treated Nekima Levy Armstrong and Chantel Allen like they were murderers, kidnappers. And then they were reading, the prosecutor you heard was reading from a complaint about how someone was scared because they went to the church to protest, as if that makes them a danger to the community. So this is a farce.
It is Freedom Friday and you are still not free.
Welcome to Freedom Friday. It is Friday and you are still not free. Today we're talking about when civil rights laws become weapons for the wrong side. We're going to title the show today, The KKK Act and the Prosecution of Black Protest. And the reason that we're doing that is because there's a story that has popped onto our screen that is distressing, that has to do with the misuse of the KKK Act. And here it is. So here's our question. What happens when laws designed to protect Black people get turned into weapons against Black people? So yesterday, Attorney Pam Bondi announced that they were arresting and going after the people who disrupted a church service in Minneapolis. The reason that church service was disrupted was because community members found out that the lead pastor in that church was actually also the field officer for ICE. And the protesters broke into the service and said, "How dare you use the house of God to do this evil?" Now, at the lead of that protest, as is often the case in Minneapolis, is Nekima Levy Armstrong, who is a local activist with national implications, because if you watched all the stuff that went on years ago with George Floyd, and if you want to know about what happened with Black men perishing at the hands of police officers over the last 10 or 15 years, Nekima has been at the forefront every single time. The first one on the scene when Philando Castile was shot as a legal gun owner in his car. The first person on the scene, one of the first people on the scene, was Nekima Levy Armstrong, and she got people to march from the site to the governor's mansion to get him up and out of bed to say this is not going to stand. So that is who Nekima Levy Armstrong is. She's always been a fearful voice for civil rights in the Twin Cities. She's a pastor, an attorney, a civil rights attorney, and a law professor. Makes her kind of a quadruple, I don't know if there's a word for 5, 6 threat, right? You know, quadruple.
There is.
Is there a 5, 6, 7?
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, what law were they using? So they arrested Nekima Levy Armstrong, Chantel Allen, who I happen to know, also a sitting school board member on the St. Paul school board, and someone named William Kelly, who's also a community member. Now, how could they arrest you for protesting at a church and disrupting church services? Well, it appears as though the act that they want to use to prosecute them is the KKK Act, and I know very little about this act. Hopefully, you brothers know more than I do about it, but that's what they were going to charge Nekima, Chantel, William Kelly, and even Don Lemon, because Don Lemon from CNN fame has been here on the scene, and he went in with the protesters because he was covering it, interviewed them in the church. He also interviewed the church pastor who was delivering a sermon at the time. So he was just doing his job as a journalist, and they also tried to arrest him. Now, the reason that they can't go after him and arrest him with charges is because he's covered, because he's a journalist. So anyways, that's the setup, fellas. As always, my question is, with a setup like that, what's the lesson here? What is the thing that you all are classroom educators, I'm a public educator. The question we would always have is, what are the things that would be in a lesson here? I don't know how else to put it, because I'm flummoxed with the Monday problem again. Say you're a teacher, you're an educator watching this. You're not just going to wring your hands. You're going to say, okay, on Monday, it's my job and my duty with 32, 35, 40 people in a room to get these minds activated on what's happening right now so that they understand. So, all right, fellas, what's the lesson here?
Yeah, I think you start off with just like you said. What is that act? What is the KKK Act? What was it? When there's an act, and going into like, okay, what is an act? When are acts introduced? It's usually, hey, something's going on. We need to bolster, or we need to reinforce, or we need to put guardrails, or something like that. So I would walk them through that process, and then dive in and have them research. Okay, what is the KKK Act? When was it implemented? Why? And then their job would be as students, okay, draw parallels. Like, is it appropriate here, or is it not? Who was being protected, and why did they want to use the military to protect civil rights, human rights, at least on paper. And then what's happening now? Why the flip to use it, as you said earlier, a weapon? It was used to protect. Now those same people use it as a weapon. And why is that? What's the rationale? Those kind of things. So really, it will be, for me, this initial lesson will be exploratory on Monday, making sure they know what happened, and then connect the dots between, the rationale for using it today, which I think they would struggle with, just logically, like why they're using it. But if we all year, this January now, we all school year, we've been sharing these patterns, and what did you say, pattern recognition? Students would ace this. It would just be learning about, okay, this is, the KKK Act, and what was it? And did it work? First of all, did the original KKK Act, did it actually work? Those are like subsequent lessons and things. But what about you, Ish?
It's federalizing this type of thing. And the original piece of the KKK Act of 1871 was the purpose to kind of quash and to protect African American rights during after enslavement was over. Yeah, after the Civil War. And it gave the president kind of this like authority to kind of quash these type of like rebellions, or quash this type of like organized criminality and domestic terrorism that was going on at the time. To use it now is very frankly disingenuous. And it also speaks to the fact how they're using the Civil Rights Act now. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act is also being weaponized against school districts, claiming that certain segments like anti-Semitism, right, is happening so rampant that the federal government needs to step in. So this tactic by the Trump administration is not new. If anything, they're trying to use these laws, like the Insurrection Act being invoked by them also, like saying like, I can do this. They're weaponizing it against any type of opposition. And I would look at past cases, right? The KKK Act was also was attempted to be used after January 6th, when they raided the Capitol against Donald Trump. So it's very much on their radar. It's also very much way where they're like looking at it and be like, we can use this against our political enemies, and then we can quash any type of dissent.
It feels like there's a lesson here to be had about the mechanics of the case, period. What is the act? How are these acts being used? Everything you all just said. And then I would ask, okay, what's the next lesson after that, right? Because that's the lesson for a general classroom. What's the lesson for a growing Black mind, for a young Black mind, right? Because this is a different task, right? Teaching a classroom of just individuals is one thing. We could talk about the 14th Amendment. We could talk about the KKK Act was meant to enforce the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was meant to make sure that we had equal protection underneath the law. Okay, that's the general lesson for everybody, right? Now let's talk about, you want to teach Black children about the country that they live in. You want to teach them specific to themselves what this all means. So there's a lesson beneath like just the plain mechanics. And I think one lesson, I'll put it back to you all. I think one lesson here is that there's the marketing of America and there's the reality of America. The Constitution is part of the marketing, right? The reality is the Constitution has not mattered in so many different cases throughout history that it's actually a little bit of a pipe dream. We can say, well, this is unconstitutional. And we would sound like fools because there have been so many things that have been unconstitutional, right? And there's been things that have been constitutional, like Plessy versus Ferguson, right? That was legal. That made things legal. You sat at the back of the bus, and that was constitutional for a period of time. What's the lesson there, fellas? Like underneath the main lesson, and how do you deliver it? Because you can't do this, I guess, Ish, you would know more than anybody right now. If I was a teacher in, how much could I get away with, Ish? If I was a teacher in the Philadelphia school district right now, and I said, listen, I'm going to take this lesson another way. We're going to study how this has never mattered, specifically for some groups.
Well, I would say that you would actually be able to get away with it regardless of your where you fall on the ideological spectrum, which is actually why it's somewhat problematic. There's, teacher protections. There are ways where you can teach whatever. You can go in your classroom, wear a "Make America Great Again" hat, probably, and have that poster up on. I know you're not rocking that. It's so funny every time. But and have that even somewhat up in your classroom, and you can probably get away with it. And unfortunately, that's just the reality across the country. So that's why I would argue teachers have a great responsibility and also a great opportunity to really go in and challenge students to think about these issues. Now, at the same time, I think it's the fear factor that prevents people from actually doing it. They'll be like, oh, well, I can't say that. I can't do that. But there are tons of teachers right now, probably right this second, saying racist things in their classrooms, indoctrinating the students with some problematic ideas. And the fact that other teachers don't recognize that they need to step up and make this at the forefront of their lesson is more about their own self-censorship in this day, in these days and times.
Is that something where you are calling on them to be the average educator to be more courageous?
Yes. And not even be more courageous. Read a book. No, sorry.
Now you're asking too much.
I know.
Now you're going overboard. Sharif, what do you think about should educators take it on themselves? It's hard to do stuff as an individual, as an individual educator.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is really a mind. If we believe mindsets matter most, one, recognizing you're actually not by yourself. Even if you do this, you're not by yourself. They want to help you feel marginalized and isolated. But there are so many people who are using their platforms, using their spaces, using their their position and privilege to make sure that there's resistance to that. And part of the cultural revolution, the center of cultural revolution has to be education, right? And so there are so many people who are doing that work. It can feel isolating, and I think that is why it's so important to be in community with others. Find community, find your community. They are out there, just like we're trying to get students to connect the dots. And I gave this analogy a long time ago, that was taught to me that just like the stars is a constellation, but we often can't see it because of the, what they call light pollution. On Earth, there's also a constellation of people, and we can't always see it because of the pollution, the distractions, the bombardment. Find that constellation that you can be a part of, that you already are a part of, but you might not be able to see. So that's one part. Second part is, I think, really, when you're talking about what's this next chapter or unit of this lesson, I think diving into this whole idea of what is a second class citizen, what is citizenry, what is second class citizenship. I would bring I'm probably every lesson bringing Malcolm to to the forefront, where he's talking about you don't have to add constitutional amendments to people who are already considered citizens. So if you're a white person, They're not adding an act to, protect your citizenry. You already are a citizen. You are the default citizen of this country. But then also looking around other countries, like what makes someone a second class citizen, and what are the patterns, what are the consistencies of lived experiences and policies and laws for people in whatever society when they are deemed second class or lower. And you'll see that across time and across space, there's some consistent othering, some consistent laws that are reinforced to make sure that they are cemented into that designated into that designation. And so doing that here, and I agree with you, the propaganda says one thing, but that was a whole point of, especially during the civil rights movement and even before that with Paul Robeson, who was, going around internationally saying like, yeah, their mouth says one thing, their law says something else.
Yeah. You always trying to get Malcolm in the classroom.
I know,
Look at
man.
you.
You know what? He just keeps popping up. You know what I mean? I don't know why.
You need more Martin in your life. You need to get Martin in that classroom.
Listen,
and not the real Martin. Not the real Martin. You need to get.
I need the other one. I need Disney Martin.
You need Disney Martin.
Well, yeah. I mean, Martin also talked about that too, bro. You can't forget about that. Like,
no,
Martin
that's what I'm saying. But he said not the real Martin. He was like he's
the
like
cartoon character.
Yeah, he's like give that version
stamp,
to tone things down.
Postage stamp Martin. You can't be taking the real Martin in the classroom either. That's against the law. All right, well, sticking with my show notes here just a little bit, I just wanted to say to educators, first of all, you are all educators, whether you're a parent, a community member, an elder, a baba, a mama, whoever you are an educator. We have just anointed every one of our people that is over the age of 5 is actually educator, because everybody can educate other people. So we're sharing information with each other so that we all educate each other. So the pattern that we, in my notes here, that I wanted to describe with this is the creation of the KKK Act, what's called the KKK Act, was meant to go after the Klan, because the Klan were burning homes, lynching Black folks, and preventing them, most importantly, preventing them from exercising their rights to vote and to have political power. So the original target was white supremacists targeting Black citizens. The modern application today is Black activists. It's being used against Black activists who are protesting ICE and the tactics of ICE in their communities. Now, isn't that ironic? The text of the law hasn't changed. It's been the same. The application of the law is what changed. And what changed is who gets to claim that they're the victim of conspiracy and intimidation. So now a white pastor in a church that is preaching the benefits of ICE attacking other citizens, the federal government, specifically going after people with an accent, people who look or sound like they are possibly from another country, people who have skin that is either Black or brown. This is the government literally pinpointing you, right? And the way that we know that that's true is because there are at least 500,000 to 1 million white so-called illegals in the United States. Now, I want to ask anybody watching, where are the pictures of them going after the whites who are so-called illegals in this country? And there's a lot of them. The top countries, I think, are South Africa and somewhere like Belgium or somewhere like that, right? But there's a list of countries where there are a whole bunch of white folks overstaying their welcome and their visas in the United States, and they're walking around illegal. In a lot of ways, like Elon Musk was when he came here, right? So where's the pinpointing of the government going after them? That's how we could prove a legal case that this is the government using race and a racial coded kind of targeting to treat citizens differently. But yet, when Black folks rush a white church, the Black folks are the terrorist. That's a lot of double language. Maybe that's the pattern to teach, is this country has always talked with a forked tongue. Now I say that, how do I prove it? Right? You help me prove it. Because, let me take the devil's advocate side. America has always been for equality and freedom for everybody. And, if you work hard and follow the rules, you all have the same fair chance underneath this government to prosper. All right. Make America great again.
Yeah, make America white again. Listen, I think, and this is why history is so important. I'd bring my other, one of my other favorite orators in, Frederick Douglass, where he laid out, like the inconsistencies, the forked tongue, whether it was, celebrating July 4th or anything else. Again, you can use their primary documents, where the forked tongue comes to life most often. Just the fact that it says in paper all men are created equal, and then going through all the twists and turns where they can say, oh yeah, all men, but you're not a man. Oh, hey, let's also introduce phrenology. Let's also introduce, all these other things that keep trying to prove that, or justify all men are created equal, and we excluded you because of these reasons. Because of these reasons, we excluded you from all men. Like that's the playbook.
Isn't
That's
that
the
why we
playbook.
needed so many amendments?
There you go.
I mean, people talk about the founding fathers
I
knew
mean, they
so
talk
much.
about it like it's
Yeah.
it's like scripture, bro. Like the way they talk about I mean, they put the Constitution and scripture on the same plane. Like this is how you know they out of their minds. You know what I mean? Like,
And many of those folks were slave owners, right?
oh yeah,
We all, we also need to remember that. And then you look at Supreme Court cases. There's several Supreme Court cases that actually prove and limit the ability for folks to actually be able to claim racial discrimination, even if there's a pattern. So if you look at those several Supreme Court cases, race consciousness and the ability to prove and point to certain things, even if there's a pattern, doesn't matter. Like literally, like if a person wants to prove like, oh, well, they don't hire no black people here and I'm the only black person, they kicked me out because I was too black. And they'll be like, oh, did they say the N-word when they were firing you? Oh, they didn't say that? Well, then you can't prove that there's racial discrimination. And that's the like lever that exists. And Sharif is right on point. There's a consistent pattern of kind of like how these laws are used and implemented. So like going back to the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, that was enacted when there was radical Republicans in the Congress, in the Senate, that were able to pass these things and override the president, even if the president vetoed. That's how strong they were at the time. And it was also military occupation of the South, of the former Confederate States. Now, there's no coincidence, though, that that was short-lived. And after the 1877 election, when there was like the compromise of 1877 with Ruther B. Hayes becoming president, they definitely went out their way and be like, we'll pull the troops out the South if you allow this president with a, electoral college tie to become the president. And there's always this type of compromise, always this type of, hedging of the bets as they go on, and at the detriment of people of color. You can even point to Supreme Courts like the cases that led to Puerto Rico and other territories not having the same rights as Americans born on American soil, which they just upheld again.
it's like this is our soil. If you're here, you're in America. But hey, you know what? Now it's not really. This is a territory. It's not. You're right. Like it's just
I think you
constant.
all are hitting on you're helping me discover the bigger lesson here, which is the lesson isn't all this technical stuff. The lesson is the misapplication, the color of law. That's what I would call the lesson here, the color of law. Because what you just said about Puerto Rico is really interesting. Because you go and colonize a place like that full of brown people and you say you're American citizens, but you don't have the same rights as American citizens, and nobody says anything. Now you go and try and take Greenland, and the whole world starts getting their armies together, right? Because the United States says, nah, we're about to make Greenland the next Puerto Rico. And the whole world is like, whoa, wait a
Yeah,
second.
they're
That's
right.
only
You can.
something we do to countries that are black or brown. We don't do that to white countries now.
Yeah. We
Y'all
stopped
gonna,
doing that during the World War, too. Like we don't, the empire, European empires are like we don't do that anymore.
we
We
don't
do
do
it in
that
other
anymore.
ways. Like
Mm-mm.
not this way.
No.
Yeah,
And now you got
neocolonialism.
France and everybody like France and Germany and others. Oh no, we got to send some people over to Greenland to protect Greenland. There's like 8 people in Greenland, right? And this is the funny thing. The funny thing is that people aren't paying attention to is Greenland's not as white as you think it is. As a matter of fact, Greenland is indigenous, right? I think people are misapplying what they think it is. But anyways, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but would that be true that the real lesson here is the color of law?
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely the color of law, because that ties into another whole lesson directly, which is like, how do people interpret? If the Constitution is the same, even though it adds amendments and things like that, but the original language is the same. The fact that people can be placed on a court for life and interpret it the way that they want to interpret it, right? Like, that's because there's no like, people say like, oh, they're supposed to use legal precedent, they're supposed to use today's context, they're supposed to use other laws. It comes down to, what do I want to do? Okay, and then, okay, if we're talking about like, you can interpret it, then what can influence your interpretation? Right? And because then that ties into the color of law. Like, yeah, you know what? Here's what's influencing my interpretation. My mindset matters most. So my mindset about you at your full humanity or lack thereof, that is what I'm using as the my calculus to interpret whether you're full citizenship or secondary citizenship or less.
So the real power, and I'm just building on what you say here, the real power is not passing. First of all, the real power isn't getting somebody elected who passes a law. The real power is in who gets to determine the application of the law, who gets to decide what the law means.
Because you could pass a law, and let's just say you get a law passed that you feel like is good, it's actually advancing justice. The next person can come in and say, you know what? Well, I'm interpreting this very differently than what you originally intended for. And my interpretation trumps, pun intended. For all you cowards who don't intend your puns, I'm one who intends my puns. So anyway, don't be a coward. Like that, that's a part of it.
Ish, what do you think about focusing in on this? The power to, whoever has the power to interpret the law is actually the real power.
I mean, all you got to do is look at Dred Scott, the Dred Scott decision, which basically said Black people were never meant to be citizens. You can't deny a white person the right to own property anywhere within the United States. That's a correct interpretation of the Constitution. And only the Civil War is the reason why that was overturned. And then the 13th and 14th Amendments. Now, it's not ironic now, and it shouldn't be lost on anybody, hopefully, that the Supreme Court right now is taking up the 14th Amendment if birthright citizenship applies to people from other countries. And see, like, we can go down the rabbit hole with all these type of interpretations, because there was even several Supreme Court decisions that basically said, like, an Indian person who's like, I was born in the Caucasus Mountains, I should be considered Caucasian. And they're like, no, you're not white. Whiteness is and like, they really ruled on this, and that's never been overturned. And it becomes a question how these laws, how all these things, like I already pointed out, the Civil Rights Act, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act is being weaponized against school districts and also colleges across the country claiming anti-Semitism, and they allow themselves to walk in now and punish those places to use that. And it should never, ever be taken for granted, or taken for granted. I said taken. Taken for granted.
I'll take taken.
Yeah, taken. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I use them words.
Yeah.
It should never be taken for granted, though, that these folks have gone out their way to twist and manipulate laws to their interest. And also how Black folks have relied on the federal government to implement these laws, hence the KKK Act, hence the Civil Rights Act, hence the Voting Rights Act, right, which has also been detoothed. These things have been purposely used by these entities to kind of undermine rights on the back end. And they do what they want at the time that they want. And I would argue that elections do matter, because that president is a president that puts in people in the Supreme Court for lifetime appointments that make these ideological decisions. And Clarence Thomas being in there, appointed under the first Bush to replace Thurgood Marshall's seat, is probably the most terrible, racist thing that has ever happened in appointments of Supreme Court justices, or how Justice Jackson Brown is, shown as like a DEI hire, even though she's the most qualified justice on the Supreme Court right now. And we need to be very clear on all these things, especially like Second Amendment rights. You have folks in Minneapolis right now arming themselves, protecting their communities, and then the right, who has been claiming Second Amendment rights all this time, are saying these people need to be arrested, their guns need to be taken away. It's crazy. And I said taken again.
Yeah, so we're adding took into the dictionary.
Bro,
The
just
double
embrace
standard
it,
here
bro.
is,
Embrace
is
it.
that's what'll make you crazy. The double standard is what'll make you crazy, because just when you're starting to believe in the marketing, you get evidence that the marketing is foul and you're stupid, right? You get the, oh, I was falling for it again. I was almost falling into a patriotic stupor, and I woke up
Shame
again
on you.
because selective application of the law. So let's just so Renee Good didn't have a right to turn her car and get moving, a right to life, right? The Somali
Judge,
woman,
jury, and executioner.
Yep.
all in one. The Somali girl who was beat up and scrapped up and humiliated and taken and took into a private
Contagious.
location and abused and then let go. That's not terror. What they did to her isn't terrorism. The 17-year-old kid working at Target that they threw to the ground, they beat up, they scuffed up. They took him to another location, and when they found out that he was an American citizen, they dropped him off at a Walmart that was far away in the cold. That wasn't terrorism. That wasn't state-sponsored terrorism. The family that was coming home to their home and had tear gas thrown at them with the baby in the car and several other kids who were just coming home in their car, American citizens and whatnot. That wasn't terrorism, right? But some protesters going into a church and protesting that this church has worked with ICE and has defended ICE using deceptive license plates and replacing their license plates, have defended them spraying chemical irritants in an irresponsible way into crowds that have affected everybody, but children and others also, because it's been indiscriminate the way that they are using these weapons and the flashbang grenades and whatnot. A church that is saying those things are okay. That terrorism, that state-sponsored terrorism is okay. That church has rights that no one else has, right? Because that church is not getting any type of problem. And Pam Bondi and others are talking about how church is a sacred space or whatnot. Now, church is not a sacred space when you think that there's immigrants in there and you're sending ICE into people's churches to pull them out of churches, right?
Oh, no. It's only sacred if it's protecting white savagery.
Exactly. The double standard here, I think, is that the actual lesson. Now, some people listening to this are going to say to us, and I want you all to answer to this charge. Some people are going to say, but then you're teaching Black kids to think that the whole world is against them and to be permanent victims and to not believe in that the system works and blah, 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 whatever. So you're being kind of, I don't know what to say, whatever any of us have been called before. Like you're just, alarmist, fear mongers, whatever. What do you do with that charge if you're an educator?
Good, it's jump in there.
Yeah, no, number one, it's BS, bro. and Sharif, you felt my energy through the screen, right?
I saw it.
Because like all the things we just laid out, everything we're talking about, it's just very consistent. The consistency has not been rights in this country. Consistency has been fascism. It has been fascism during Jim Crow. There's no coincidence. The Nazis and also the apartheid South African government modeled a lot of what they did with the minoritized populations based on what the U.S. was doing to Black folks. And this idea that we can rely on this government or rely on things, people moral conscious in this country doing the right thing has been proven over and over again to be short-lived and then also not really fully applicable to the long term for people's rights. And the only reason we even have a concept of freedom in this country is because Black people have gone out their way, put their lives on the line to fight for it continuously, and not to be apologetic, not to back down when these folks have sick dogs on us or put water hoses or all this. And that's the only reason we even know this, or the world knows it the way it does today. So it's just the crazy, anybody calling anybody a victim, or you have a victim mentality because you're aware and woke to this reality. No, that's how you navigate it. That's how you step into the situation, be very clear that this is not fair. It has never been fair. And the only reason that it has anything associated to being fair is because Black people in this country have stood up and were fully aware of its contradictions and its lies.
Raising those contradictions, as Chairman Fred used to say, is absolutely critical to, one, keep your sanity. I think that's a big part. Everybody talking about mental health. Keep thinking that everything is copacetic, and when it's really not. Like that's I think number one for for mental health. The other is like a positive racial identity, because they'll have you thinking that there's something wrong with you. Like we used to have to share with our students, I shared this before, like any student who competes with other students, sports, chess, art, whatever, they're the first one to realize the inequities, right? Because they're not seeing it on TV and books. They're visiting schools a mile away and saying, whoa, how come our school? And, I used to hear some students actually expressing their internalized racism, not understanding the funding structure, the tax codes, and all these things. They're just saying like, well, we're here, so it must be something wrong with us for us to have a school that's, bombed out like this, where
That's
lower
the message that they're getting though, right? Their eyes are
absolutely,
telling them that.
absolutely,
Yeah.
and this gets reinforced, right? Because Lower Merion will build a new school in 20 years, not because it's 100 years old, because it's 20 years old.
Yeah, wow.
Where in Philly, you got buildings that were built in the early 1900s and struggling, to right now, I think I've read somewhere 85 of our school buildings are deemed in disrepair, like at the bottom of the rung as far as like ratings, But I would say, back to your point, Chris, I think a big part of where they want to blame and say, hey, there's nothing to see here. They really want that Men in Black flash, flasher. That's what they are using all the time. Just erase everything. No, you're on equal footing, but I'm like, okay, equal footing. Then why did Judge Taney have a mindset that still permeates America today? Because he was expressing something that had permeated a couple hundred years before, and now 100 plus years, after, a couple hundred years after, is the same thing, that Black folks, and I would say Black folks, people of color, white people who support full human rights and full citizenship, they have no rights with which the white man, the original white man, was bound to respect. And when I say original white man, I mean the genocidal maniacs that came to this country. They have no right. You have no right that we are bound to respect. That's what you're seeing play out. That's what we're seeing play out right now. That you don't have a right. Again, you don't have a right because you're not a full citizen. And I don't care if you get a couple extra dollars. We let you move into a gated community. We let you, get a title, have letters after your name. All of that. At the bottom line, the foundational aspect is, we don't have to. We can turn the right to respect that right off whenever we want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the policy and laws we see playing out.
Make America great again.
That feels a little bit dangerous to teach in a classroom, in a mainstream classroom.
Oh yeah, make it dangerous, baby.
I know. And Chris, I really need to emphasize the point. Our children are being indoctrinated with the opposite.
Yeah,
like what Sharif
dangerous.
was just talking about, like something is wrong with you. Our students literally believe something is wrong with them. Something's wrong with their family because they haven't made it. All they need to do is get a job and work hard and all this nonsense. And it's like they're never told they're exploited. They're never told that they're pushed aside. And they need to know that, not in order to be a victim, but in order to be a determiner of their own destiny.
I want to keep pushing on this because both of you have a focus on Black educators and getting more Black educators in the classroom. I don't know what the stats are, and Sharif, you might know better than anybody what the stats are of Black educators who are the only one in their school, right? Like I'm a Black male, I'm in a school, and I'm not like, it's not like there's a whole bunch of us together. So whatever I do, I'm under the microscope when I teach these type of things. Well, first of all, do you have a general idea of how many that's the case for Black teachers? Like how many are the only in the building?
No, the lone and lonely, I don't have those. I know half the schools have 0 people of color.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
so that's about as close. So you imagine if 50% have 0 people of color as teachers, then, there's probably a range, this continuum of like what it looks like where the lone and lonely is the next largest group,
Well, I feel anecdotally speaking that over the years, even at BMEC, I've talked to a lot of individuals who are not in a school where there's a bunch of them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of them are in schools where they're only one. So let's say they get out there, they become Sharif or Ish. They're gonna get like they're gonna be bad on Monday. They're gonna go in, they're gonna teach the real thing, blah 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 blah. I'm just wondering what the realities are, the occupational realities of being that teacher who does that is.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think one, being in the community, understanding like what are the risks, like what's the rules, like how it permeate, what's the culture, and then the beautiful thing about teaching and a dope teacher, is that they're the creativity that they bring to the concepts. The creativity for the curriculum, right? Like, it's like an artist. Do I paint this with a broad brush or a fine tipped brush? Which one am I using, right? That's the skill of an educator. That's the skill of a master teacher. And so again, if you are new to this, if you know what I mean, you can be true to this but still very new to this and still need the mentorship, the understanding, etc. But like that's why community is so important. That's why mentorship is so important. That is why, those who take their craft seriously are constantly learning. It ain't just like, the content. I need to know this content. Yes, you need to know that. You need to know it fully. You need to get all these different perspectives and everything. You also need to know how to teach. How to teach, I think, and this is why, I fell in love with great instruction when Miss Yvonne Savior was teaching me how to teach in my first year of teaching. Because there are ways to do this, right? Like there are questions that you can, there's some teachers I know, they were like, the most important thing that they do is write down the questions they want to make sure that they pose before the lesson ends.
That's dope.
That's real talk.
It is real talk, and I feel like you're gonna get people real fired. But
listen, if you're on the verge of getting fired, you ain't doing your job, bro.
Like I mean, told you, we used to break our huddle. Me and all these other young teachers, we would break our huddle. And again, these weren't people. We weren't like, oh, we're already established. We would break our huddles, both as teachers and then we were new principals. We're like, hey, don't be afraid to get fired on behalf of kids today. And I get it. Like there's a level of privilege and being in community where, we had safety nets in community to do that. We're in Philadelphia. I only taught in Southwest Philadelphia. So I get it, and there are other folks around the country who are in precarious situations on the precipice, and they're also finding ways to do it. But again, this is why you have to know, like Public Enemy said, don't go alone. Don't go alone. Right. And so
move as a team.
Yeah, move as a team.
Move as a team.
And as far as like strategy, like this goes back to the strategy. Like everything might not be the hammer where you're just like with a megaphone saying this and that and this and that. Like, unless if I was in hostile territory, which we're within these borders, but if I was on the continuum of super hostility about teaching truth, my question may, sometimes it's just planting the seed. Maybe my assignment is just like, hey, what does it mean to be a a second class citizen? I'm not talking about anybody specific. I'm just saying like, hey, let's talk about what would it mean to have a second class citizen. Just because I want them to be aware that there is a thing, even if I'm not saying like, hey, this is what's happening. This was like, I might not need to do that. But if I open their eye, if I help them shrink their blind spots, that to me, that's the lesson. Like that is the lesson at that point. And maybe I'm just reinforcing that. Maybe I'm using Animal Farm and we're just talking about that. And they think they're learning about the Russian Revolution, but they're actually learning about people right here. They're learning about human beings in positions of
You know
power
what?
and what
On
happens.
multiple of these shows now, you didn't mention this book. Now I feel like I got to go back and
Right. If
reread
you
this
have
book
not
again.
reread
Oh, yeah.
that as an older person, you
Mm-mm.
got to.
No,
Even
no,
the
I
even the
left that
Dead
book
Press
in grade
song.
school. Yeah, I left that back in school days.
No, bro. It's what? Because when you read it, what I notice is like when teachers teach it at a younger age, they're not actually talking about they're just reading it as a novel.
Is there a movie?
Yeah, there
Yes, it's
is
a cartoon, but you don't need to
Okay.
watch that. You need
Yeah,
to read the
I'm gonna go
book.
watch the cartoon. I'm gonna go
And-
watch the cartoon.
and Dead Prez has a great song called "Animal and Man," which is just a beautiful song that breaks down the whole story in a rap song. Animal and Man.
That's in the movie, the cartoon.
No,
they
Dead
didn't use that.
Prez.
This was afterwards.
Yeah,
Oh,
this is
okay.
after. Yeah, Dead Prez, the rap group.
All right. Well, listen, my final addition here is to say to people listening or watching, number one, first of all, if you want the show notes that we have today, they are much more in depth than the conversation that we're having right now. So I will gladly make sure that you get those. If you contact me, contact us through YouTube, and we will send you a link to the show notes from today and all the backing resources that go along with it. I will also say, if you have enjoyed this program, please like it and share it with others and help us grow the show. We are on amazing growth kind of curve right now, which is great. And that's all because of people like you listening and watching. My final addition to the lesson point here is one that I didn't get to. Lesson 4 in all of this is that this isn't random. The AG could have chosen to charge Nekima and Chantel and William. She could have chosen to accuse them of trespassing, disorderly conduct, and disturbing the peace. And all of those things are misdemeanors. But instead, she reached for a federal felony statute with a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison, right, for protesting. Now, let me say that again. You could have typically been charged with trespassing, disorderly conduct, or disturbing the peace.
Which is normally what happens when you get arrested for protesting, right?
Yeah, those three. But the choice here is, number one, to get a photo op and make a national example out of a Black woman who very much, in many ways, has the politics of Fannie Lou Hamer, right? To pull that person out nationally and say, we're going to make because this isn't just random. Nekima Levy Armstrong, for herself, was a former president of the NAACP. She was a mayoral candidate. She's an ordained pastor herself. And she was also, along with Chantel Allen, are the lead advisors of Minnesota's Black Lives Matter group that started years ago, right? So she's not random. She has been on the scene of these things. So to apply undue punishment to her now, I just want to finish, my point off with this exclamation point. The January 6 protesters, as we're calling them, the rioters who attacked the Capitol of the United States and beat up law enforcement officers, and fatally so in one or two cases, who attempt to storm into the chambers to stop the transfer of government, they were pardoned by the United States of America, by the president of the United States. They were not terrorists. They were not charged underneath the KKK Act. They were charged and convicted and then pardoned by the same president who's going after Nekima Levy. Now, what's so important to me about that also, too, is those same people, Enrique Torres, I think his name is, was one of the people who masterminded that January 6th takeover. He's the leader of the Proud Boys. Today, when the list just was leaked, the list of the names of people that are ICE officers right now roaming the streets with masks on, he's one of them. He masterminded the sacking of the American government capital, right? He got arrested and charged and convicted of that. He was pardoned, and now he's a paid employee of this administration, deputized to do his wildest dreams, which is put on a mask and go after people of color.
And don't let the name mislead you. Enrique Torres.
Yeah, and he's a person of color too, which is a whole another
right?
white supremacy.
Leading white supremacy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you can't be white supremacist if you're a person of color. Man, have you been paying attention? Damn. Well, anyways, that's my final wrap up. What's your guys' final wrap up on this?
No, man, that's one, just sending much love to Nekima, done a ton of work with her. You first introduced us way back when, and then had the pleasure and honor, of supporting her in other ways. And it reminds me again when we're elevating the inconsistencies, just the even just the small example. Again, this is something where, even behind hostile territory, you can talk about like, hey, when are that phrase of I protect the blue or whatever, whatever that phrase is to show support for cops. Like, okay, January 6th, when doesn't it happen? Like, like you would think if you were consistent with that, like, oh yeah, we support cops. Like, so what happened on January 6th? Where did the support morph into? Right? Like, so all of these just different examples of like the strategy and the changelings, and this is what it is, like almost from like cartoon changelings, where they're able to like just reinvent what the law and make you think like, no, that's not really what it says. Oh yeah, this is sacred space, blah blah blah. You got people in there defecating on the desk. You got people who are just like, and then when you see people in suits and ties protesting peacefully, you're like, oh yeah, that's I'm going to define terrorism. And this is why it's so important to name things, define things, and keep amplification of like what it actually is, because they will literally change the definition of a word. Same way as they co-opt our language, that we may speak it and say, oh, like now that this means something else. They do it with the same stuff as far as policies and rules and laws, like just the term terrorism. Black people have been terrorized on these shores. People of color have been terrorized on these shores nonstop. Yet going to a church to protest, which is supposed to be freedom of speech, freedom to protest, all these things, that's now criminalized.
Here's I just want to add this one point,
yeah, please.
They didn't break into the church.
Oh no, they walked
the church was open. The
Yeah.
church was open, right? They didn't break in. So I just wanted, for the people listening and watching, it wasn't like they broke into a church. They climbed over some fence or something.
No, but that's the thing. But you inconvenienced us and you embarrassed us, so now you're a criminal.
Yeah.
At the
And
end
the
of the day,
government
like
and it's our government that will come
Yes.
after you, not your government that will protect you, right? Ish, what do you think, man? Go ahead and give people some advice that'll get them fired.
Yeah. Put yourself in the position. Like your courage. And Chris, you must be reading my mind. I was literally thinking about what type of call folks need to hear right now in this moment. In Philadelphia yesterday, they took down the George Washington slave house material because of Trump. They took down the fact that owner judge who escaped from George Washington from Philadelphia and got her freedom and never was caught, even though she was hunted down still by George Washington, was taken down. Again, taken. And this reflects kind of where we're at right now. So if you're just, and I'm paraphrasing Asad Shakur right here, I don't have the quote right up in front of me, but if you know what's going on and you do nothing but sit on your ass, you are a punk. You are a punk, and we deserve what we get if we still allow this to happen. And right now, it should be more stark than ever. So if you're an educator right now in the classroom and you ain't speaking truth, if you ain't educating yourself, if you ain't pushing the limits of your union protected job, if you're up in the north, or you're not doing the protections in order to benefit the students and the communities in which you serve, you're nothing but a punk. and you don't deserve to be in front of students. You don't deserve to have that certification, because you're not educating, you're indoctrinating, and you're perpetuating the situation that we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing too. It just, use strategy, because every time you teach, it doesn't mean that it has to be in their buildings. Like I think that's probably one of the most important things. People are like, oh, I can't teach this in my classroom. I'm getting observed. Like, that's not the only place you got a mouth and a brain and content and curriculum and lessons to be learned and taught. Like, that's not the only place. You know what I mean? So the best way to do it is to model. Like, how do you model full citizenship? How do you model respecting people's full human rights? And then, in the Islamic scripture, in the Quran, God says, "Isn't my earth vast enough?" When people were talking about, like, well, I'm oppressed here, and like, isn't my earth vast enough? Well, let's put that on a microcosm. Isn't the area to teach vast enough? So outside of that, that structure, is there no other place that you can teach? And I don't mean necessarily like quitting and leave. I'm saying, where else can where else can truth be heard? Is it in Sunday school? Is it on a porch? Is it on the weekend? Is it on some corner? Is it in the library? Is it as you're coaching athletics? Are you helping kids connect the dots? Where else can truth be heard and taught?
Freedom Friday.
Freedom. I love it. Yeah.
See, y'all are going to get some people arrested, but anyways, not just fired, but arrested. Well, listen, this has been another,
right? For sedition.
Yes, seditious mindset. That's going to be the next. It's just the mindset is going to get you in trouble now. Well, listen, we've given you several, I think, kind of fictional things you go look at. I think we hit on the Matrix in here somewhere. I think maybe, and definitely Animal Farm again. I definitely think the folks here would say 1984 again. And you just the Changelings. I don't even know what that is, but the Changelings. Maybe
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, people should be. You ain't got to wait till July 4th to read Frederick Douglass' speech about the July 4th. You don't have to wait till somebody. Here's why classrooms are so, just any classrooms. And I also want to give Chris a shout out before we end. Chris opened up saying he was a public educator. I remember years ago he was like, I'm not an educator. But the fact that he's embracing his role,
public educator. Yes.
Yeah, but like that's a beautiful
That's
thing.
a real thing.
They have heard you say that. I didn't want to interrupt you when you said it.
It's your pushing,
But
actually,
I was
that made
excited.
me do it. So it's your pushing over the years that made me say, well, I am trying to teach. I am attempting to use my platform as a classroom and as a source of information and resource exchange. So anyways, that's better in my mind than public intellectual. Public people say public intellectual. I don't know what that means. Like I'm intellectualizing, like the brother that just got out of penitentiary wants to intellectualize things, right? Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro.
We need that sometimes, you know what I mean? But no, but somebody had posted, and I was glad. I just read the comments, but somebody posted, "Hey, people need to." Nobody ever heard of Paul Robeson. And people were just like, who has not heard of Paul Robeson? Use I statements, sir, right? Like, even so our audience, research Paul Robeson, what he was about, what he was doing, you know what I mean? Like the politics of the time and the stances that he took.
I appreciate that. Paul Robeson, Marcus Garvey, James Baldwin, Fannie Lou Hamer. These are all people in one way or another. Their spirits are over this conversation. Frederick Douglass, their spirits are all over this conversation. One we did not name that I think is appropriate to name with Nekima, because Nekima and I have had very long conversations, and I know who some of her inspirations are. And I know she's studied history, so she understands like where her inspirations come from. We had a really deep, long conversation once about Nat Turner, and I made the comment that I didn't know what good it was that Nat Turner did what he did, because it's suicidal or martyrdom, or it's just like, you're fighting a fight that is going to end in your demise and you can no longer lead. And she gave me a very long kind of, not even defense, because what she was defending against was my ignorance, not needing to defend Nat Turner. But his spiritual righteousness and motivating factors or whatnot did leave a mark, because right after that happened with him, some other chain reactions things happened, and she laid him out for me. So the spirit of Nat Turner is also needing to be brought up in this. And yeah, and Ish just reminded me too, John Brown. And he was another one where I said, this is just a suicide mission. I mean, that's just like, he just, I mean, you tell somebody go do that today, you just died. That's it. No, because after he did what he did, some other things started happening that were important for him to have done what he did. So I'm not going to be as harsh as Ish and call you a punk if you don't want to be, you don't want to be John Brown, you a punk.
Listen, we need more John Browns and less Charlie Browns.
Ooh, now see, why you gonna mess with Charlie Brown? Now, I grew up on Charlie Brown. See, now you messing with the wrong stuff. Well, listen, everybody, this has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you're still not free, but hopefully you're freer after this hour with Ish, Sharif, and me, and we will see you on the next show. Please like it, save it, share it with others. We appreciate you. Bye.